Truth be told, I discussed much of my thoughts regarding the Beast last week, but held off on 3 points of interest to give this episode a purpose, and that's firstly, the Zillo is force sensitive.
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
Given it's able to identify Palps from everyone else, and it has a particular grudge towards him based on our dark side or devil doing nothing to mask his essence, and what Palps wants from him feeds into my second point, and that is the Beast's scales being repurposed into clone armor, which, if you weren't aware, could be done to protect the clones from several weapon strikes, including a lightsaber.
It all makes sense now.
And third, the Zillo almost became a galactic hero by bringing down the head of Imperial oppression for over 30 years.
I salute you, sir.
We open on the Zillo arriving on Coruscant to a battalion of clones aiming at something they'll never be able to compete with as Mace begins to pry into Dr. Ball's treatment of the Beast, and Palps gives a telling look towards it as it's being unloaded into the containment facility.
The fuck y'all looking at?
Upon his return, Mace and Obi-Wan discuss why the Chancellor would even want to bring such a thing back to a populated planet, but despite discovering the potential properties that can be applied to their army, something of which could be done off-world, they have no jurisdiction from this point on until Obi-Wan suggests deploying another means of figuring out what he wants from this.
Not a great plan.
We quickly cut back to Dr. Ball and Palps discussing what should be done with the Beast, where Ball expresses her hesitance to simply kill the Zillo due to its existence being the last of its kind, to which Palps replies, isn't it worth the loss of one life to protect the thousands?
No, he's got a point.
Which would be a fair reasoning in some regards, but not if it leads to the extinction of another species, I guess. After much pushback, Palps demands that she follow his instructions and terminate the Zillo by synthesizing a fuel from Malastare to act as a toxin that can be sprayed onto it as a means of euthanizing it.
Holy shit.
However, as Palps readies to leave, the Beast can understand him here, looking visibly pissed off with everything he's had to say, and keeps his eyes locked on him throughout the conversation. Back at the Senate, Anakin meets with Obi-Wan, who has brought Padme in on the conversation, and they ask that he at least try and reason with the Chancellor regarding the situation, and try and put this out to the full Senate to decide on, as the Zillo has no autonomy here and was chained up against its will. Anakin agrees to at least discuss this, and the discussion goes about as well as you'd expect, with Padme being berated for focusing on matters that don't concern her, with Palps twisting this brilliantly by saying that everyone he's expected to serve and protect is dying faster than he can count, so is it not worth the death of one to save the many and give the clones an advantage in ending this war?
He's out of line, but he's right.
However, Padme's concern is if they decide to let this one go, how many other times will something similar crop up down the road and it will be thrown to the wind for the greater good?
How can this be for the greater good? The greater good. Shut it!
As the talks go to shit, Dr. Ball informs Palps that she's ready to administer the gas to the Zillo, however this enrages it and it manages to muster up the fucks to escape and begins tearing through Coruscant headed straight for the Senate building.
Run! It's Godzilla! It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
And after a hair-raising couple of minutes of drama surrounding the Zillo almost getting its hands on Palps, the Jedi intervene, launching missiles containing the gas to quickly destroy it, and it succumbs to the effects of the fuel, with the Zillo slumping down the building and dies. And we close on the Chancellor feeding the Jedi some bullshit about making sure that the Beast's sacrifice wasn't in vain, and as he readies to leave, Palps gives Dr. Ball instructions to clone the Zillo as he flies away with a growing smirk on his face. So if it wasn't clear, this episode was very much one large ethical debate, and truthfully, I find myself stuck every time I see topics explored like this in fiction. As on one hand, the Zillo's anatomical structure could offer an incredible bounty of support for the Republic as a means of strengthening their armies to end the war. However, you would be removing the last remaining member of a species to anyone's knowledge, and against its will, to simply serve yourself without concern for what this means for the Zillo race. And I think this episode does a fantastic job of acknowledging these thoughts and considerations, whilst being written to have logical arguments and counterpoints that divide the loyalties of everyone involved in the conversation. But above all else, this cleverly works in little meddling from Big Papa Palps as he puts pressure on the Jedi even further. Where politics aside, Palps forced the Jedi to commit an atrocity here that they wouldn't otherwise do, and flies directly in the face of what they stand for, and that was murdering the Beast. Where upon its discovery it was trying to simply defend itself and was following its instinctual programming to survive, until the Dugs coerced the Jedi into assisting them in destroying the Beast once and for all, and they instead took the initiative to try and preserve it, only for Palps to intervene and feel that it could be repurposed with possible thought of what it could do elsewhere, and drove the Jedi under the thumb to bring it to a deeply populated planet.
Hey, did you know that carrots are good for your eyesight?
You lied to me.
And we see that all besides Anakin are very direct in their concerns surrounding the Zillo's arrival on world, and that from the beginning their philosophies and teachings dictate that they will not knowingly take a life of another. And Palps knows this, so to not only win his way with claiming the Zillo's genetic makeup for the potential use later on, he also twists the knife even further in the moral descent of the Jedi, as they're backed into a corner with terminating a sentient life in the name of the Republic, and disturbingly, in the name of the Chancellor. All of this may not have been intended when writing this episode, but kudos to anyone who did mean for this to be the case, as it's fucking genius, and feeds in beautifully to his character and everything he wants the Jedi to feel emotionally, before striking the final blow, and twisting public perception along the way would certainly brighten his day as well. Anyway though, to cover the less subtle beats from this installment, we must first discuss the semi-sentience of the Zillo beast, later confirmed by Dave Filoni to be Force sensitive. I know this sounds a bit outlandish when you say it, but let's be honest, there's far more ludicrous ideas presented from a galaxy far, far away. I actually love this idea, as it doesn't reduce the Zillo to just being a savage, simple-minded throwaway outing for the Jedi to deal with during the war, but actually a creature of agency and credibility, providing an idea of how these beasts may have operated before as a society and connected with the life around them, though they would still obviously need to eat. It's not unheard of either for wildlife or animals to respond to the Force, given the Bendu is a creature of thought, and the Draco beasts and Loth wolves respond to it as well. So this works well as an element to its character, but truthfully adds a degree of tension to his direct chase around a city searching for Palpatine, which was the most compelling part to this entire episode, with the Zillo's fixation on the Chancellor, which was rightfully deserved as the guy was trying to find every conceivable means and reason in the book to have it executed, but the belief is, with it being Force sensitive, that it could feel the darkness emanating from him and was determined to snuff it out, and that had the beast succeeded, he would have been the unsung hero to the galaxy, stopping over 30 years of bloodshed and anguish and torment at the hands of this walking bag of bones. And to put a dampener on this even further, you could argue that the beast's roars and screeches in part 1 were a message to say leave me be, and then in part 2 it was let me help you, he's the problem. It is a tragedy to lose the Zillo given what it was capable of and what it could have done for the galaxy, but when you realise how vicious they are as an infant, thanks to the Bad Batch's encounter with this little one's clone, you begin to feel less bad about the possibility of keeping them extinct. However, speaking of its cloning, we have to acknowledge why Palps wanted this to begin with, and that was for the purposes of creating a near impenetrable army that could withstand just about anything, which seems innocent enough and well-meaning on the surface, as it would require less funding for more troops as they make a stand with the ones they have world to world, but we have to agree that there is a more sinister motivation to this, and that is what the clones will eventually be used for.
Execute Order 66.
Yes, Lord Sidious.
These men are designed to execute the Jedi in the end as part of Palps' galactic domination plan, but we see many of them get mowed down in response for their actions. But what if they had impenetrable armor? It would mean that the clones could be sent out to execute Order 66 against the Jedi and barely encounter any resistance from it, as the scales of the beast prove to be impervious to lightsabers and would give the Empire their perfect army. But as it is right now, we know that the Empire has a Zillo in their basement on Mount Tantis, but as to what they'll do with it, we've yet to find out, but hopefully we'll receive some answers to in the up-and-coming Bad Batch's third and final season that is set to arrive next year. It's always a delight to overanalyze episodes like this to see the subtle subtext of Palpatine's goals and desires steadily creeping in and beginning to impact the lives around him. Everything's coming up Palpy with this one, and overall it's an exciting watch with gravitas behind it. It makes for an interesting ethical debate with intelligently written dialogue, and the beast running rampant on the city certainly drudges up the nostalgia for those old kaiju movies. However, I will say one thing that really stood out to me in this episode that was pretty rough in my opinion is the animation, and that's surprising too given season 2 gave us moments like this. But aside from that, the energy was there, the musical compositions closing on the beast's death were excellent, and I love what this little duology gave us. A break from sanity of all fucking things. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me for this week though everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you like what you saw here, please be sure to hit the thumbs up and make sure to subscribe, and until next time everyone, take care, and may the Force be with you.